And don't forget, welcome back, BKP here. Good morning from beautiful downtown Blue Ridge, the Vault. You could text me at any time, 706-889-9700, or you can also send me an email at chief@fetchernews.com. I did not put this out earlier, but I know several of you, our guest here, some of you, he needs no introduction, but for those new viewers this morning, Dr. Whaley, we want to thank Georgia Cancer Specialist. But before we start, Dr. Whaley, if you get me any emails throughout the week, or if you get them to me early in the morning, I can give those to Dr. Whaley and he can look at them throughout the week. Last week you brought up, and I just wanted you to know, you brought up the first time in how many years that life expectancy had decreased.
Right.
You were not out that door. You probably couldn't have got around the corner. I got an email from one of our viewers in LJ, a lady that watches in LJ that watched your segment, and you weren't around that corner that they emailed me the article, and I was able to read the article that afternoon. So I just want to say thank you so much for the information you bring, and I want you to know we have people out there that are listening. This lady in LJ sent me that article the very minute you left last week.
Good.
What do you have for us this morning? I'm always on the edge of my seat waiting to hear.
My wife said make it more of a dialogue, so wake up, Jane.
We only have so much time.
Yeah, I know. So I always,
I'm telling you what my wife said.
I always like to begin by tying this to stuff that you're doing, and that is, we talked about the polls for 6 months. There's no path to 270, and up till 8 o'clock at night, Trump can't possibly win. I call that statistics. Statistics is a refuge for fools. And I'm going to mention 3 different articles today that are in the medical news this week that purport to be the oracle at Delphi shining down on us with information that we just have to believe. And they rely on statistics. And we'll show you how statistics can be manipulated. You can prove any darn thing you want. The big headline this week was abortions found to have little effect on women's mental health. That came out on Wednesday. I heard it on the Communist News Network. I heard it on the news as I was driving up here. And historically, everybody has known that women who have abortion over the course of the rest of their, particularly adolescence and young adult life, but maybe for life, have guilt or something. So obviously some of them don't, but it's a precipitator of a post-traumatic stress disorder-like syndrome on a lot of women who have abortion. So if you were going to try and counter that argument and figure that one state in the nation was going to do a study, what state would you pick? I mean, it wouldn't be Arizona, it wouldn't be Utah, it'd be one that has a whole bunch of pinkos and legalized marijuana. So when I've asked my staff yesterday, what state do you think would do that, would that study originate in? 5 of my staff out of 7 said California. Well, that's where it comes from, California. And if it comes from California, what city might it come from in California? It comes from San Francisco. And if you're going to pick an institution, it's going to be one of the public liberal institutions in California. And they did a study, and they published it, and it was in the Journal of the American Medical Association Psychiatric Edition, Wednesday, where they took women who had an abortion and women who went to the abortion and then were denied the abortion because they were too far along in their pregnancy, and they followed them for 5 years to see who had the most psychological damage. Well, what they said it was the women who didn't get the abortion that had the most psychological damage, not the ones who got the abortion. Well, you stop and think about it, those women who didn't get the abortion because they were too far along in the pregnancy are sort of the late-term abortion things. And that's not the right population. I mean, if they want to study that group of women who had the abortion, they should study a group of women who had pregnancies and wanted the pregnancies and had babies. Anyway, the point was, I think that was flawed statistics. And goes with the liberal agenda and the swamp that needs to be drained and everything else. It just came out at an interesting time. My staff was talking about it, and I said, look, it's not the Oracle of Delphi. Don't bow to that throne.
Well, you know, I appreciate you doing that, because I was talking this morning, it seems like we're all looking for the truth, and it seems like it's bubbled to the top here recently that for me, all of a sudden, I've been looking for the truth for a while, but all of a sudden everybody's looking for the truth. And you hear a study has come out on this and a study has come on that. How would you, if you're out there especially the medical field like this, and I appreciate this information you bring us, but if we're out here and we're hearing, oh, a study was just released on this medically, or this causes this, how do we out here discern, do the research, or find out how to accept that study?
It's hard work. My wife is convinced that this right here causes Alzheimer's. My wife is convinced. My wife is.
You do know you're getting in trouble, but that's okay. I can't bring you back in now. You're going to do for.
My wife is convinced that standard immunizations for children is associated with autism. And when she sees it on YouTube and thinks that it's real, I say, Jane, go to the internet and pick any source that you think is honest, whether it's the National Institutes of Health or the Harvard newsletter or Consumer Reports or whatever. Google the same thing and get 10 other articles and just listen to what they have to say. Because all of the people that have gone for the autism with immunizations have come to the conclusion that it's not related. So it's very difficult to find. I'll give you another article, came out yesterday. All during the fall, you began every session talking about the guys who were going to be on the sideline of the high school football games up here.
Yes.
And we mentioned one time that there's a very high index today of recognizing the head injury, removing the high school athlete from the game, and he can't go back until he's been tested by somebody who knows about head injury.
Right.
So now we've got this great group of mothers in the North Georgia counties with young men who want to play soccer, they want to play football, they may want to wrestle, and they are just worried to death about their heads because of the NFL concussion study and all these NFL players who are having neurological defects from their head injuries. The Mayo Clinic, I trust the Mayo Clinic in Rochester. The Mayo Clinic in Rochester published yesterday what I think is a beautiful study. They have a population, a rural population in Rochester, Minnesota, not much different than North Georgia. They go back to 1905, I think, so that's 110 years of data. And what they did was they took all of the high school athletes in their database that had had a head injury going back 40 years. And they are their continuing form of their source of medical care for the rest of these people's lives. And they then looked at what percentage of those kids that played high school football, the percentage that played high school football or high school soccer, even for just one season, ended up later in life with Parkinson's disease or neurological disorders. And what they found was that the number of high school athletes is approximately the same as their classmates over 50 years that ended up with any sort of degenerative brain disease. Slightly higher if they had played 2 seasons of a contact sport, but not very great. And what they were trying to say was, as long as your high school athlete is playing at the high school level and he doesn't get into the big top 25 of the NCAA where they're really professionals, or into professional athletics where they're getting beat to death, let your kid play. It's probably safe. So I think that was a really fundamentally reassuring study for our mothers in North Georgia who have their kids that Gilmer and
So
Fannin
that
and
is
Union
that
playing.
is a study that they can look at for parents that may be concerned of what if their child plays high school football, what would it do later on? Because no disrespect to the talent, I don't want to go there, but the majority of high school kids are not going on to the college ranks.
That's right.
And they're not going on to the pro ranks.
That's
and
right.
those are things that you could be concerned about and should be as they continue on. But if you're going to play 2 years of high school football,
That's the point. High school football is team building. It's good nutrition. It's good exercise. It's staying away from tobacco. It's making friends you have for life. It's goal-oriented. I mean, every single solitary thing about it. I don't care whether it's the track team or the golf team or anything else, are character-building things that will help people in the rest of their life. Now, in high school football, they don't give you a participation trophy like they do when you're 8 years old in Little League, and you can fail in high school athletics. Well, that's one of the problems with our adolescents today is they've never had to fail and cope with it. I mean, when when everybody who plays gets a trophy, and you all got safe space, and your teacher can't discipline you or whack you on the fanny anymore. Kids get out into life, and they've never had a failure. They've never had to deal with anything. High school athletics is a great opportunity to win some and lose some. And that lesson, you win some and you lose some, and it's how you play the game. That's really pretty important, I think.
Well, you had me, Dr. Whaley, until you brought back memories of high school teachers and getting paddling. I was okay until you brought that memory back.
Well, we did, didn't we? We talked about this last week.
We had, you never forget the guy's name, no matter how old you are. His name was Mr. Snodgrass, and if you're out there anywhere, I've used your name, Mr. Snodgrass. And when he wrote when he wrote the disciplinary form, and you're sitting in his office, there was a box, 1 lick, 2 licks, or 3. And you sitting over there and you're nervous wreck because you was wondering which one was he.
Right. Well,
I didn't mean to go there.
No, I understand. In my grammar school,
but I lived to talk about it.
Yeah, you did.
And we're all nervous.
Were you in a Catholic school or public school?
No, that was public school.
Yeah,
yes.
I was too. Yeah.
Yeah,
it was a lot harder. It was a lot harder in Catholic schools. I did not go to one, but it was true. And I think that all ended in the late '50s, along the time Dr. Spock came along. But I went to first grade in 1945.
I had nieces and nephews that went to Catholic school, and they found out what the ruler was for. And
it's not to measure.
But something else you said there in that, and we're talking about it. When I played high school football, I don't want to make light of head injury studies, but at the same time, we call it getting your bell rung.
Yes.
Right?
Right.
And you come over the sideline and coach grabbed you by the face mask, looked at you, did you get your bell rung? Yeah. Do you know what your name is? Yeah. All right, get back in there. Yeah. Now, I'm not saying
No, it's a little more.
I do want to say now, Georgia High School, GHSA, has a requirement that there's somebody trained on the sideline that can do the test.
Yeah, and you don't go back in.
Right.
No.
They do the test.
So does NCAA.
Right.
We're on the ball now. I'm not going to worry about that.
I don't mean to get sidetracked, but I enjoy our time. I don't want to leave. What else do you have on your
All right,
notes?
well, wait a minute. Now, we got to have the food recall. The food recall. Last week it was 2 million pounds of chicken.
Yes, I remember.
This week it's Publix supermarkets. That's right here in the South. They've recalled all of their pancake batter and their waffle mix and their banana bread mix because remember we're talking about powdered milk?
Yes.
Okay, because there's powdered milk that's got salmonella in it out there. And all over the United States, potato chips, nacho chips that are made with that powdered milk are getting recalled hand over fist. I'd say that if you go to the supermarket, none of them are Lay's. I didn't see any of them that were branded. You can continue to buy the waffle mix that says Hungry Jack on it, because that's the one my wife buys. But anyhow, I thought it was interesting that since last week, the powdered milk powdered milk recall, you think, oh, powdered milk, nobody uses powdered milk, but it's the industrial use of that powdered milk that really is the big issue. The peanut butter scandal in last week we talked about that. It really wasn't the peanut butter, it was all the peanut butter cups and cookies and everything else that had been made out of that peanut butter. So when they recalled the peanut butter, it was the products. When they recall in the milk, it's the cookies that were made out of the milk. When it's that 2 million pounds of chicken, it's the chicken fingers and the chicken salad made out of it that you ultimately have.
How do they find that? Like, how do they find salmonella in powdered milk? How do they
that's really interesting. The industry is supposed to test randomly a certain percentage of the lots. And if they test it chemically and bacteriologically and find it, they're supposed to immediately notify the FDA and stop the production from that plant and the shipping of it. Salmonella can be really kind of underneath the radar there, and until 4 or 5 people get salmonella in a community, and the Georgia Public Health or the CDC or somebody says, wait a minute, you're not supposed to have 5 cases of salmonella in a county of 17,000 people in 2 weeks, and come in there and start taking a history and find out that all of them ate a packaged salad, then that comes out of your public health service. So it's kind of hard. So there's a lot more. Remember I said 1 in every 6 people in the United States will get foodborne illness every year. So there's a ton of it out there that doesn't get to the recall point.
All right, what else on those notes? Because I always look at all your notes.
All right, okay. All right, we got the Zika update here.
Okay.
We can't ever go without the Zika update. Okay, now, a study was published this week. 46% of the kids born of women infected with the Zika virus had birth defects in the Brazilian study, which now goes back 2.5 years. Last week I said that in the United States, the percentage that had birth defects was 11%. Well, this week they clarified that. And they clarified it by showing that at birth you may have 11% birth defects, but over the course of the next 2 years, these other birth defects that don't show up at birth show up. One, you can be born with a normal size head, but it won't grow. So 2 years later, you got the small head. So some of those babies are born with a small head, some of the other ones, the head doesn't grow. The thing about the eyes, that you don't know a kid's blind until he's 4, 5, 6 months old. So anyway, the 11% that we said last week is the number of people in the babies born of our patients in the United States with Zika virus who have a birth defect. It's going to be a lot more by the time we get to 2 years. And they re-emphasize that right now we have to think of I want you to listen to this. We have to think of Zika as a sexually transmitted disease. If a male has been to South Florida or anywhere in Central America, for 6 months he's supposed to be doing safe sex. And as I've said every week since we started this last July, I can't think of any 23, 25-year-old, 27-year-old, or 30-year-old single guy who's been down to Miami Beach and been to South Beach who's going to be practicing safe sex until next April. So it hadn't all gone away.
Well, the only thing that caught me there is you stopped at 30-year-old.
Hey, you want to talk about airline pilots?
Let's keep it going.
Okay, good.
I see the list. I want to try to get everything.
All right, here's another one of the statistics will tell you anything. We know about that German airline pilot who flew his airplane into the Alps and killed the whole plane worth of people. We know about the Japanese airline guy who drove the 747 into Tokyo Bay and killed all those people. So a study came out this week, and I headed the FAA's Part 67, that's the medical thing, rewriting in the 80s, so I really know about this stuff. 12.6% of airline pilots in this particular study, which was a lot of pilots, I think 900 pilots in Australia, US, and Europe, so it's pretty good cross-section, had features by history that could say you were clinically depressed. 4% of them had suicidal thoughts within the prior 2 weeks. Well, boy, you read that and you go, my gosh, I shouldn't be flying. Well, my medical history form has, have you ever smoked or everything? Have you ever thought about harming yourself?
Right.
Well, if somebody circles that and says no, then I know that they have not been totally frank and honest in their history, because everybody has thoughts of harming themselves. You, me, all of us have thoughts of harming ourselves. Now, thoughts of harming yourself within the last 2 weeks? Maybe not. Well, that's only 4%. So I went, after I read that study, and I went back and looked at the American Psychological Society and the incidence of not clinical depression now, just depression by history form in normal people. And the normal population is 11.5%. So this is 12.6%. Well, if they just studied trial lawyers, or just studied TV personalities, or just studied district attorneys, they're a little more stressed than the average population, right. So they might be like airline pilots. So I wasn't the least bit worried about that airline pilot study, but if you look in the newspaper, somebody's reading that thing right now wondering whether I should go to Texas and visit Mama for Christmas because I'm going to have to fly. So it's another one of those statistics, or the refuge of fools. Well,
refuge of fools, I like that statement, because I tell you, I often have known that certain studies, not specific ones, but certain studies obviously have a geared outcome before they start the study. There's a determination of the outcome before the first day of the study, and they tailor it that way.
You don't really think that's true, do you? I mean,
yes,
you don't think that political polls, or have you stopped beating your wife yet? I mean, that's the way you ask the question. You can't answer that question. You can't answer that question in a way that doesn't accuse you of beating your wife, right? So if you just look at the polls where they're talking about,
and if not, when do you play?
Yeah, that's right. When there's no path to 270.
Yeah.
And Obama's approval rating is 56%.
I knew what that was.
And the negatives for Hillary Clinton are less than the negatives for Trump, or whatever it is. It's all in how you ask the question. Now, we got one of the world's great trial lawyers and now district attorneys coming in here in a few minutes. And I've been cross-examined since I was born. My mother was a lawyer, my daddy was a lawyer, all my brothers were lawyers, and my next youngest brother is a chief judge in the Ninth Circuit.
I really don't know what that says.
What it says was, I know you never ask a question of a witness.
So at dinner, did everybody cross-examine each other?
You don't know the answer, and you don't.
That's exactly right.
Or you're shot. And my dad says you never want a jury of 12 people that you don't have some really good idea of what they're like, because of 12 people, there could be 2 or 3 folks in there you just don't know or understand. Well, that's the whole thing about the statistics and about taking surveys. It's all in how you ask the question. Years ago, when we were talking here in Fannin County, when they were doing the census, we had a community anger. I had my dandruff up about the way in which certain of those questions on the census were asked, because they were couched in such a fashion, I think, that disparaged the education of the rural South. Remember that?
Yes.
Anyway, I don't think the federal government does a good job. When I say you want to go to a good source, if it's medical, go back to the Mayo Clinic and the Harvard newsletter and stuff, and stay off of Facebook and some of those conspiracy theory places my wife listens to all the time. Jane, I hope you're up listening to this.
Jane, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. Okay. Dr. Whaley, I thank you so much. It's just an enjoyable segment we have every Friday morning. If you have, now like I said, last week Dr. Whaley was talking about some studies that he had been paying attention to and keeping up with in the medical field, and you sent me an email right after the show. Throughout the week, if there's anything on a Friday you want to discuss or anything like that, you send it to chief@fetchernews.com or text me 706-889-9700. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. It's cold out there. Stay warm.
Everybody needs to stay listening to the next segment. They got one of the great community servants coming in here.
Our next guest will be Allison Sosby. She's the Appalachian Judicial District Attorney. So we're going to have her in here, and we're going to talk about the first 4 years, a little bit of what's going on in the district, maybe have some insight from her about the Department of Justice, a little further there, what she's seeing there, and actually the concern we all have with the attacks on our law enforcement and what's going on with that. So we'll be back right after these brief messages. Again, Dr. Whaley, thank you very much. We're live from the vault in Blue Ridge. Come get your donuts, your coffee, and stay warm. Cole, take us to break.